Hello there, I'm Manila Chan. You're watching In Question, broadcasting live from RT American National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. Here are the stories we're working on for you today. First up, Iran claims it has arrested 8 people connected to the CIA, allegedly stoking unrest in the country. This comes as the State Department is reviewing thousands of messages they say they received from Iranians angry at their own leaders. Plus, what is all the fuss in Libya? And why are American officials suddenly concerned with Moscow's role in the region? We're going to discuss that with our next guest. And then, did you know that everything high-tech, everything from your phones to computers, jets, they're all made with rare earth minerals? So there's so much demand for these elements, one country has plans to meet the growing need. All right, it's time to boost your news IQ. Iran's supreme leader has once again defended his country's gasoline price hike and rationing that have triggered violent protests across the country. Meantime, top Iranian officials say they've arrested 8 people with ties to the CIA. All this unfolding as the State Department is going through thousands of messages they've received from Iranian protesters. RT's Saya Tabinger has the rest of the story.
Well, Manila, according to Iranian officials, at least 8 individuals with ties with the CIA were arrested in Iran during the protests over a recent fuel hike. Iran's intelligence ministry tells the state news agency IRNA that those detained, quote, had received CIA-funded training in various countries under the cover of becoming citizen journalists. 6 were reportedly arrested attending street riots while carrying out CIA orders, while 2 others were apprehended as they were trying to send information abroad. Now, meantime, today, Iran's supreme leader claimed without any evidence that the recent protests across the Islamic Republic over the government's gasoline prices were part of a conspiracy involving the U.S. Ayatollah Khamenei made those comments while addressing members of the Revolutionary Guard Basij force, which helped put down the demonstrators.
It was a deep, extensive, and very dangerous conspiracy that cost the U.S. so much money and effort. They wanted to use an opportunity to carry out this move, which was an act of destruction, arson, murder, and vandalism under the pretext of gasoline price increase. They thought that they had found the opportunity and brought their troops to the field. This move was destroyed by the people.
Manila, this is not also the first time that the supreme leader blames any kind of protest happening in Iran to outside, like in terms of countries like U.S. and Israel. But these comments come just one day after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the State Department received nearly 20,000 messages from Iranians saying that the protests have been violently suppressed during the internet blackout. Now, here is Pompeo speaking about those messages during a press conference on Tuesday.
Last week, the regime shut down the internet to prevent the truth about the protests from getting out. I asked Iranians to share their messages with the United States so we could expose and sanction the abuses of the Iranian regime. We've received to date nearly 20,000 messages, videos, pictures, notes of the regime's abuses through Telegram messaging services. I hope they will continue to be sent to us. We will continue to sanction Iranian officials who are responsible for these human rights abuses, just like we did last week.
Now, Pompeo was referring to sanctions on Iranian Communication Minister Mohammad Javad Jahromi for what it said was his role in this vast censorship on the internet.
Now, Saya, let's talk about some numbers here. The Iranian government at all announced the number of the protesters killed or people arrested during these protests?
Well, Iran's government still hasn't offered any statistics on arrests, injuries, or deaths in the protests, which began November 15th. But Amnesty International says it believes that the violence killed at least 143 people, something Iran disputes, without offering any evidence to support its claims. But Manila, One lawmaker was quoted as telling authorities that more than 7,000 people were arrested. Now, there's also reports of U.S.-trained Iraqi forces that have been deployed in Iran, posing as the Iranian Ba'athist militias to take part in the brutal crackdown on the recent protests. Now, meantime, Iran's head of the Revolutionary Guard addressed a pro-government rally and accused the U.S., the U.K., Israel, and Saudi Arabia of stoking the unrest happening in his country. Now, he went on to say that Iran will destroy the United States and its allies if they cross Tehran's red lines. Reporting in the newsroom, Saeed Tavenger, RT.
And for more on the events unfolding in Iran, we'll turn to our panel of experts. What a treat. Former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras and former Pentagon official Mike Maloof. Might I add, decades of U.S. government experience here.
Too many decades.
So a lot of knowledge here.
Speak for yourself, Jim.
So, guys, we know it's no secret the U.S. has had a very long history of interventionism, not only in Iran, I mean, all over the world. The CIA, we have overthrows all over the place. But is there any meat or any potatoes here this time to the Ayatollah's accusations?
Well, look, if I could start, I mean, I don't think anybody should discount there is genuine discontent in Iran, that there's a huge segment of the population that is very unhappy with the current government in Tehran. And if I were in Iranian, maybe I would be unhappy with them too, just as there was unhappiness in 1979 when the Shah was overthrown.
Right.
However, I think that we need to make a distinction between that and what is the U.S. policy. I don't doubt that Mr. Pompeo has gotten these messages from Iran, from people who are discontented. But what is the U.S. policy goal here? It is to put maximum economic and financial pressure on Iran to cause the crisis to get worse, to make people more miserable as possible as we put sanctions on dozens of countries over the decades in order to cause unrest, to feed unrest in order to achieve a regime change. As far as these people that are arrested, whether they were really operatives being supported by us, I don't know about these individuals, but I don't doubt there are people like that we are supporting there, because what we want is regime change. We don't give a damn about the Iranian people.
Yeah, I would add that Pompeo, in his remarks, also said to the Iranian people, we support you, we back you.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to do that except paying lip service or providing assistance? And it's been through assistance like this that we've seen in the past, where even during the Obama administration, the Israelis were used in hired MEK types inside of Iran to kill Iranian nuclear scientists, and this has been documented, and the fact that we're not there working behind the scenes is you got to believe in fantasy land. Of course we are. We want regime change, as Jim says, the United States does, and they're going to take advantage of this opportunity of rioting and maybe even accentuate it. But the problem is, we don't, like in Libya, we don't have a second-day plan should there be a success in overthrowing that government, which I don't think is going to happen. But it's like everything else. We go in, overthrow governments like we did in Iraq, but we don't do anything afterwards, and it causes even greater rebellion within and in the region, and we got to stop doing that. And that's why Trump, to his credit, doesn't want to do that. He was almost forced to it by Bolton. Now he's got Pompeo, who's sort of advocated. 10 minutes.
Right. We're just
10 minutes.
Steps away from going toe-to-toe there.
That's correct.
So,
and you can't rule out the possibility that we're still trying to egg things on behind the scenes, and then everyone wonders why did the Ayatollah and the Iranian government get all upset? Well, there's a good reason.
And Jim, you brought up a good point. You brought up the sanctions. Obviously, the U.S. sanctions on Iran have had a major impact on their domestic price problems. Mm-hmm. In this instance, we're talking about gas prices there, and a lot of other goods.
Medical treatment, right. Things like that. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So it's impacting the people
yes.
directly. It's not really hurting the government. It's not hurting the Ayatollah.
No.
But what else would the U.S., what other options does the U.S. have to try to bring Iran back to the negotiating table to, I don't know, broker a peace deal or broker a new JCPOA? I mean, what other options?
Well, that's where I think there's a lack of coherence in the administration's policy, because I don't know if what Mr. Trump wants, or if Mr. Trump knows what he wants, if what he wants is the same thing that Mike Pompeo and the rest of the administration want. Just like, for example, with North Korea, we have maximum pressure, put the squeeze on North Korea, and then Trump wants to turn around and cut a deal with them. And that's That's what he said all along. We don't like the JCPOA because it's a bad deal. We want a much better deal with Iran. Maybe he wants to make a better deal. That's not what these guys want. What these guys want is regime change, and they're willing to go to war to get it if they can. I don't think Mr. Trump wants a war. Again, let's take a step back into American politics where he's facing impeachment. I think he would maybe like a win somewhere. He doesn't want a war somewhere. And at the same time, we're going all this hue and cry. Oh, the Russians meddle on our election. The Ukrainians meddle on our election. We meddle in other people's internal affairs all the time.
We overthrow governments.
Because we're the good guys. Regime change are us.
Yeah, well, I would add that right now there is a stalemate in diplomacy. The Iranians will not negotiate with Trump because he has violated agreements, perfect agreements that were in place, and there was adherence to those agreements. And even the European allies were for it. I don't think it's going to happen anything is going to happen between the United States and Iran. My thought is it's going to have to be from the outside. It's going to have to be the countries in the region who are going to have to come together. And the Russians have actually come up with a Persian Gulf security and cooperation organization that they're trying to get off the ground now, which would encompass all those countries. U.S. has been invited, but so far they've chosen not to join. But it would include not only Saudi Arabia, but also Iran and China. I mean, the countries that have a vested interest in that region should come together and work out their own solutions. The Arab League would be another possibility. We need to be working. They're not going to listen to us directly. I think we need to go indirectly through these other sources.
By the way, that's the same thing Trump has said with regard to going to get out of Syria. Let the local countries. Why do we have a dog in this fight? And that's where he gets back to this. For all the sympathy we should all have for people in Iran, why are we trying to make their conditions worse? Because the Saudis and the Israelis don't like the Iranian government. Why are we doing that to people? Why aren't we trying to make their lives better? Why aren't we trying to try to relax tensions in the region and improve the lives of people?
Jim, doesn't this highlight the fractioning between Trump and his cabinet then? If the cabinet, if we want to call them the deep state, if that's what they want and this is what he wants, why is nobody calling him out on
this is what it comes down. Trump ran on an America First platform. We never got America First. In that region, we have Israel and Saudi Arabia first. That's what they want. That's what the deep state here wants. This is our program. We overthrow governments because that's what we do.
That's what we do.
It serves other
that's
people's
historically
purposes.
been what the neocons have been doing. Pompeo represents that. So does Pence, by the way. And before we got rid of him, Bolton was the same way. And regime changed, but they didn't have enough. If you didn't believe in our form of democracy, we were going to shoot it into your head. And we also had undertaken what was called a preemptive policy at one point, where we would go in and take them over. That's what we did in Iraq, with plans to do it in Tehran and Damascus back in 2003. That failed, and look at the mess we have today.
And again, none of this is to take away from how people in Iran feel. In other words, if somebody said, well, America's causing all this, we're not causing this. We're maybe pouring gasoline on the fire. We're agitating it. We're trying to put pressure on people so their lives are miserable and they protest. It's a siege warfare. That's what we're doing. But it doesn't mean that those conditions don't exist and these people don't have a genuine beef against their government.
You see, the JCPOA was meant to be a baseline upon which to build relationships.
Going forward.
And Trump blew that out of the water. Going forward. And that got all blown out of the water.
Because I think they convinced him, if you do this, you can get a better deal, rather than what they really wanted it. If you can do this, we can have a war. We can have a regime change.
Dealing with Iran is different than dealing with North Korea.
Yeah, he was listening to his neocons.
Well, it's not working in North Korea either. That all seems to be falling apart too.
The neocon approach is not working, and we need to understand that finally and get over this nonsense of trying to overthrow regimes.
Gentlemen, I could be talking to you for the rest of the half hour, but unfortunately I got to cut it off and leave it right there. We will be right back because after this, the United States is now protesting the alleged presence of Russian troops in Libya, which one of our experts just mentioned. Our studio guest is calling this a huge contradiction. We're going to discuss that right after the break. And then over in the world of sports, Steve Christakis is going to share some surprising news from former LA Galaxy star Zlatan Ibrahimovic. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay tuned.
Aeroflot, Russian Airlines.
I'm Chris Hedges. The corporate coup d'etat has destroyed our democratic institutions. The commercial media is burlesque, part of the reality show presidency. Expose the trivia, lies, and deceit. On Contact, question more.
I turn on the TV, learn about the world and what's happening around me. I see shills on the screen spitting lies every day because the fake news narratives is how they stay paid. Seeing too many goons who are building up prisons with bomb after bomb, brick by brick globalism, making mile-high money off that endless war. But I found a network that'll question more. Science breakthroughs, outer space, civil strife. Climate change, cyber warfare, coups, and violence. All that mainstream wants to do is keep us quiet. Watch the riots, can't keep us silenced. Critical voices, bold perspective. Question more is our directive. We don't take sides, we walk the walk. RT America means real talk.
All right, the U.S. is apparently protesting the alleged presence of Russian troops in Libya. Now, this claim is being made by State Department official David Schenker, who recently told reporters that Russian regulars were being sent into Libya in significant numbers to support the Libyan National Army, and that it, quote, raises the specter of large-scale casualties among the civilian population. So keep in mind, this is the same country where back in 2011, the U.S. was a major driving force behind regime change there, targeting Muammar Gaddafi, if you recall, who was eventually killed by U.S.-backed moderate rebels. And who can forget the 2012 attack on 4 Americans at the consulate in Benghazi? So it seems kind of unfair, right, that the U.S. wants to blame Russia for just, about everything these days, even in a region where they themselves created the mess to begin with. So joining us to discuss this a little bit more, RT's Nebojsa Malik, who recently wrote an op-ed on this very topic on RT.com. Neb, did you get your name on there this time?
I did.
Oh, very good. Good. Malik. I always have to add the ch. So on this op-ed, why is the U.S. suddenly worried about Libya? They went in, destroyed it, walked away. Hillary talked about it for a brief moment, and then, now it's over.
And that's the thing that sort of struck me, is that this feigned concern for civilian casualties. Like, an estimated 25,000 people died in 2011 alone during the regime change operation, and countless more since. I mean, the country's been just turned to absolute ruin. Yeah. There's been reports of open-air slave markets, just
human trafficking,
complete disaster, ISIS everywhere, civil war, warlords, warring tribes, sectarian. The most prosperous economy in Africa turned to ashes.
Right.
But now the Russians are supposed to be the problem. I don't know if there's Russian troops there. I honestly don't.
Right.
But it's very, very rich for the State Department to complain about, somebody else is intervening. They might actually fix this.
Obviously, a little bit of sarcasm there, folks. But, that is the kettle calling the pot black, just a little bit, I might say.
Pretty much.
So it seems, though, that, Russia continues to be the boogeyman for the U.S., literally about everything. I mean, your internet goes down. It must be the Russians hacking you or whatever. But now they're blaming Moscow for Libya.
Apparently, blame Russia is the order of the day in every single government department, as well as Congress, as well as the...
Sure.
I'm just waiting for the Supreme Court to start blaming Russia for everything.
Sure.
The thing with Libya, though, is that if the Syrian experience is anything to go by, if there are actual Russians in Libya, they might actually fix it. Because it took until the Russian intervention in Syria to actually turn around the war against ISIS.
Well, that is a good point.
The data's pretty much there. I mean, you look at the timeline, you look at the troop engagements, and you see that it was the Russian intervention that made a crucial difference. So, I mean, this whole thing is absurd because the general, who is at this point controlling most of Libya,
Khalifa Haftar.
Right. General Haftar actually lived in Northern Virginia for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
If anybody
right
fits,
by Langley, right, we
if
add.
anybody fits the definition, the textbook definition of an American asset, it's General Haftar.
Right.
And now he's being declared a Russian asset because Moscow's in talks with him. And apparently the State Department was very late getting on that train. They just had a delegation talking to him because they officially recognize this unity government that doesn't control any of the country except the capital. So again, it's a huge mess of their own making, and they're now trying to blame Russia for attempting to fix it because of a articulated fear in some circles that, oh, if Russia sets up a base there, it might flank NATO. Needless to say, nobody's asking if NATO itself should even exist at this point, 30 years past its expiration date.
Sure.
But that's a whole different discussion. I think it's just extremely cynical for the State Department of the U.S. government that created the mess in Libya to begin with and killed God knows how many people with their regime change operation to worry about civilian lives all of a sudden because somebody else is trying to fix the problem that they made.
So I want to talk a little bit more while I still have some time about Khalifa Haftar to get people up to speed. Can you fill us in about who he was, how he ended up in the U.S., literally just down the road from CIA headquarters in Langley for the past 20 or 30 years, and now he's shipped back to Libya because he was a Gaddafi friend.
He was one of Gaddafi's generals during the disastrous war in Chad in the 1980s. And when his pretty much entire force got captured, he chose to seek asylum in the U.S. rather than go home and be executed. And he spent the next almost 25 years in the U.S., living in Northern Virginia, right next to the CIA, being a good Libyan exile, being kept as a pocket card for regime change. And then he wasn't really activated in 2011. That honor went to the jihadists in Benghazi.
Yes.
And then he moved back to Libya at some point after that. I don't want to get the time wrong, so I'm not exactly sure. And ended up setting up this Libyan National Army using his organizational skills and connections. But ironically, it wasn't the U.S. backing him, it was other people. And there's this whole intersection of U.S., Turkey, Russia, various outside actors backing various factions.
Yeah.
But the U.S. was very, very late getting onto the Haftar wagon, comparatively speaking. And so now they're declaring him a Russian agent, which again is absurd because Haftar's in it for himself and the people of Libya who've had quite enough of this abortion of an experiment in democracy.
I just gotta wonder, Neb, if General Haftar made somebody really mad here in the U.S. and now, the narrative is changing the other way.
I guess we'll have to find out.
We will see. It's, like you said, an experiment in Libya. Neboj Shamalic, thank you so much. Read his op-ed on RT.com. And over to an escalation of violence over in Iraq. Officials now say at least 5 people are dead after 3 separate explosions rocked areas of Baghdad on Tuesday. The attack is being called the first coordinated attack since anti-government protests began weeks ago. Elsewhere around that country, violent clashes with police have continued. Protesters are accusing the Shiite-led government of being corrupt and complaining about public services and high unemployment rates there. Since that unrest began in October, at least 350 people have been killed. And over to Colombia, where protesters are back on the streets of Bogota, clashing with riot police there. This comes after Colombian President Iván Duque held talks with protest leaders. Still, though, neither side were able to agree on a clear path forward. Demonstrators are protesting economic inequality and violence against social leaders. The new strike comes nearly a week after 250,000 Colombians marched in one of the nation's largest ever protests. So did you know rare earth minerals can be found in pretty much everything in today's modern age? You find them obviously in your smartphones, microchips, laptops, your video games, appliances, TVs, I mean, literally you name it. Once upon a time, the U.S. dominated the mining of these rare earth minerals, but now that coveted title has shifted over to China. RT correspondent Farron Franzak has more to the story.
If you're watching this on your smartphone, you have to thank China for that. That's because China generates roughly 70% of mined rare earth minerals and controls 90% of the market, a global market that's $4 billion. Now, China just announced it's raising its annual mining quota for rare earths by 10%, raising it to 132,000 tons, a move that's likely to shake up global prices. All this while the U.S. and China are still locked in trade talks. This could put the little competitors out there into a tight cash situation especially since many are trying to invest in new rare earth projects. Rare earths are 17 chemically related elements that are found in just about everything high-tech, but also they're found in high-power magnets, targeting systems, even fighter jets. 30 years ago, the Chinese government banned foreigners from mining them, but back in July, President Donald Trump ordered the U.S. Defense Department to spur production of a wide range of rare earth magnets that are found in a lot of military hardware. This because of the growing concern that China could restrict exports of these elements. That's why U.S. and Australian officials have set in stone a partnership to set up mines outside of China. But it's not just these two countries that are seeing all that China's doing. Greenland and India, they're also looking into jumping in on the deal. But one analyst says that when it comes to these mining startups, the world is littered with projects that have tried to get up but have failed miserably.
All right, I am over in the world of sports with our own Steve Christakos. Steve, you have a story I don't like to talk about because we've lost LA Galaxy star Zlatan.
Yeah, he's one of your guys.
He's out of here.
He is.
What's up?
Just 2 weeks after, he made a huge announcement. Check this out. But you might like this one. I don't know. So 2 weeks after he bid farewell to the LA Galaxy, Zlatan Ibrahimovic is back in Swedish football. However, it won't be on the pitch. Ibra is bringing his talents to the owner's box. The 38-year-old is now part owner of Hammarby after buying half the stakes in entertainment conglomerate AEG Sweden, which gives him ownership of about a quarter of the team. Hammarby finished third in Sweden's top league this season, just behind Zlatan's former club, Malmö. The Swedish legend has 62 goals and 116 appearances for his country. And when asked if he is concerned that Malmö fans may be disappointed by the move, Zlatan said this has nothing to do with where his career began, and what he did for Malmö will be there forever. And staying on the soccer pitch, it is arguably one of the most popular sports around the world. And for a special group of athletes, they don't let their handicap get in the way of playing their favorite game. Fans flooded into a Gaza stadium to watch the final match of the Palestinian Amputee Football Association. The Al Salam and Al Jazeera clubs faced off for the championship title. PAFA was founded back in March of 2018 to provide a way for injured men and women to engage in sports on a competitive level. Currently, there are 80 male players that make up the association, with reported plans to form a women's league. The organization is also in the process to join the World Amputee Football Federation, which includes players from 46 different countries. The Palestinians hope their application is accepted for a chance to represent their region at the 2022 Amputee Football World Cup. Until then, footballer Hatim Balusha's goal is to show the world that no one is defined by their disability.
In the upcoming period, we hope to go abroad and play international matches where we can deliver the message of the Palestinian people. Even of the siege, pain, misery, amputation, and handicap, we will continue to deliver our message to the world that this handicap will not make us incapable of playing football.
Well, that's really great, Steve. I hope to see kids do that.
Yes, of course. That'd be wonderful.
All right, guys. That's all the time for right now. We'll see you back on Friday. I'm Manila Chan.
I'm Steve Christakos.
We'll see you.
Aeroflot, Russian Airlines.